Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Moss, and in this video, we'll be exploring static thresholds, a fundamental concept in observability and monitoring. Static thresholds are not a one-size-fits-all solution, but in this video, we'll define what static thresholds are and how they fit into your overall observability strategy. We'll talk about when you should use them for setting up alerts, when they might not be the best choice, and what alternatives you can explore when static thresholds might not be appropriate. And finally, I'll show you how to create an alert rule using a static threshold in Splunk Observability Cloud. Static thresholds are predefined fixed limits set on metrics or logs, and if a monitored value crosses this threshold, it triggers an alert. For example, you might create a static threshold that triggers an alert when the CPU utilization of a particular host crosses 90%. So when should you use static thresholds? Static thresholds are termed static because they remain constant over time. So they're most effective when you have well-defined performance boundaries and failure conditions. Common metrics that you might monitor using static thresholds are CPU utilization, memory usage, disk usage, network latency, and error rates. Disk usage is a great use case for static thresholds. You'll often be in scenarios where you need to send an alert when the disk usage of a particular host crosses a threshold like 80% or above. And static thresholds can also be used in Boolean true-false conditions. Like if you've set up a synthetic monitoring test and the test fails, you can create a static threshold that alerts when that test fails. But when are static thresholds not ideal to use? If your metrics have regular daily or monthly patterns, static thresholds might trigger false alarms during peak hours or on specific days. This also applies to systems with more dynamic workloads. In Kubernetes, for instance, pods can automatically scale, and the same can be said for AWS services like EC2. Having said that, depending on the observability tool that you're using, it may allow you to set an alert sensitivity that provides more flexibility with static thresholds by adding a temporal dimension to the threshold. I'll show an example of this when we look at static thresholds in Splunk Observability Cloud. If a static threshold isn't appropriate for your use case, then what else can you use? Dynamic thresholds adapt to changing patterns in your data. However, they can be a little more complex to set up. The same goes for machine learning powered anomaly detection, which uses algorithms to benchmark behavior and then identify deviations from what's considered normal behavior, offering a more sophisticated approach. Most of the time, you'll want to use both of these strategies, static thresholds and more dynamic methods, in order to create a robust alerting strategy. Now that we've done a quick introduction to static thresholds, let's see a demonstration of them in Splunk Observability Cloud. From the home page, I'll navigate over to the infrastructure page. And what I want to do is create a detector for memory utilization for my AWS EC2 instances. And to do that, I'm actually going to create a detector using a pre-configured chart. From here, I'll select the EC2 navigator. And for my EC2 dashboard, I'm going to select a specific instance. From here, I can create an alert from one of these charts. I'll select the bell icon for memory utilization. This pulls up a list of linked detectors that will alert based on the data from this chart. I'm going to select New Detector from Chart. It gives me a message that the detector I'm about to create will not be linked to the chart because I don't have the right permissions, but that's okay. I'm going to continue creating the detector and I'll select OK. I'll add my name to the detector name. And I'll select the time frame to be 1 hour. This chart shows the memory utilization of multiple EC2 instances. I'm going to navigate to the alert condition, and the first option in the alert condition is a static threshold. And like we talked about before, a static threshold is useful for a static range of good and bad values, and they can be used for SLAs as well. I'll select Proceed to Alert Settings. And then in the alert settings, we can specify the conditions in which this alert will be triggered. Now for a static threshold, we can alert when we are above or below a target value, and also if we are within or outside of a particular range of values. I'm going to keep it simple and select above. And for the threshold, memory utilization is a percentage. And from the chart, it looks like all of these instances are under 50% memory utilization. So I'm going to select a threshold of 50. And when I do that, you'll notice that it gives me a preview of how many alerts would have been activated or triggered in this time period based off of my conditions. And in this case, it's 0 because none of these EC2 instances are using more than 50% of their memory. Now, if I were to set that threshold lower to, let's say, 20%, the preview will be updated. And now you can see that the preview updates the estimated alert count to 1 instance of the alert being triggered. And that's indicated by this red triangle at the time at which it would have been activated. And you can also see in the detail view the highlighted red area showing what instances are above that threshold. Now, the thing about metrics like CPU utilization and memory utilization is that they can potentially have bursts for a short period, and that might be fine. It might not actually cause a degradation of performance for your application. And in those instances, you don't want to have an alert storm created because you have multiple short bursts throughout the day where CPU utilization spikes above your static threshold uh, for a given alert. So you'll notice under the threshold value, there's this trigger sensitivity, and currently it's set to immediately. And what this means is that if any instance goes above that threshold, it will immediately trigger the alert rule and notify whoever is specified in the alert recipients. However, what we can do is select a duration or percent of duration. So if I select duration, it will only trigger when the signal remains above the threshold value for a specified duration. For instance, if your memory utilization is above 90% for 15 or 20 minutes, that's a pretty good indication that the instance is under quite a bit of load. And it's possible if that instance is taking requests that there is a performance degradation. It will probably take you some time to identify what is the right duration value for an alert to trigger. And if you want to be even more granular, you can use a percent of duration. And what this is saying is that it will trigger based on the percentage of data points that violate the threshold within a given duration. So for example, if I put 5 minutes here, what we're saying is that if memory utilization is above 20% for 100% of the time of a 5-minute duration, then we will trigger this alert. And so these are a couple of ways that you can make static thresholds more effective, while still keeping your configuration fairly simple. And as I mentioned before, we can create static thresholds to alert for Boolean conditions like synthetic tests that are failing. From here, I could navigate to the synthetics page, and I'll select one of my synthetics tests. And in the top right corner, you have this Create Detector button. And from this page, you can configure an alert based off of a static threshold. In this default configuration, we're triggering the alert when the uptime is below 90%, and if it's violated 1 time. This is also split by the location in which the synthetics test is being executed. But we could also alert based on other dimensions as well, not just uptime. You can see all of the other metrics that we could alert on from this synthetic test. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, we'd love to hear your feedback. And if you're interested in trying Splunk Observability Cloud, you can navigate to this link to claim a free 14-day trial. Thanks for watching.